the next stage in thinking about the demand curve is to think of factors that shift the demand curve. So these are anything that affects demand other than price will cause the demand curve to shift. Okay, so let's take an example. We'll read the text on the slide in a minute. Suppose that it's the demand for these energy drinks, and there's a very successful advertising campaign which makes these energy drinks really hot. You know, people. I don't mean literally hot, but you know, something that people want to buy. What's that going to do? It's going to increase the quantity that people buy at every price. Whatever the price is, they're now going to demand more energy drinks than they did before. So anything that increases the demand, what's that going to do to the demand curve? It's going to shift it to the right. Okay, if you think, compare D1 with D0. So D0 is where we started. As a result of the advertising campaign, the quantities demanded are now higher. Whatever the price is, more is being demanded. That shifts the demand curve to the right. So it will shift it to something like D1. Okay, now think of something, let's take an example, something that might cause the demand curve to shift in the other direction. Okay, it mustn't be a change in price, it's got to be something else. Okay, suppose that there's a health scare, so the opposite. So suddenly we realize that all this sugar in these energy drinks is bad for us, or there's some other problem with energy drinks. So they're bad for you. They cause illness or even death. Okay, well, people are going to stop buying them if they find out. So that in that case, the quantity demanded is going to decline at every price. So the demand curve is going to shift to the left. Okay, so there are lots of factors. Well, lots. There are several factors that we can think of that cause the demand curve to shift to the right. And I think that probably if I move on to the next slide, it's going to list those factors. So I'll just hold off and identifying them. So what you can note on this slide, and you might think this is too much detail. The first bullet point, a change in price results in a movement along the demand curve. So we saw that on the previous slide. So if the price changes, you think of it as a movement along a particular demand curve. A change in, second bullet point, a change in factors other than the price of the good or service shifts the demand curve. And that will call that a change in demand. So anything other than price that causes the demand curve to shift, we're going to refer to that as a change in demand. So strictly speaking, a change in the price is a change in the quantity demand, leads to a change in the quantity demanded, and a change in another factor leads to a change in demand. That is a good form of language to use. Some people are stricter about that than others. I will try to use that language. But the key thing is, if it's something other than price that affects demand, it's a shift. It's a shift of the demand curve. Okay, right. So maybe just have a little think about that. Make sure that that's clear to you. So on this slide, we've got some of the factors other than price that affect demand and therefore shift the demand curve. So let's think about them in terms of how they affect demand. And I hope that it will be obvious to you that an increase in demand is a rightward shift in the demand curve, and something that reduces demand is a leftward shift in the demand curve. Okay, so let's take the first example, the price of related goods. Okay, so if you have pairs of goods, it's possible that they can be related to each other. So one kind of relation, there are two kinds of relationship. One kind of relationship is that they're substitutes. So let's suppose that we're talking, the drinks we're talking about, they aren't exactly energy drinks, are Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola, right? They're pretty close. They're substitutes for one another. I mean, they're basically the same, aren't they? As far as I'm concerned, they're the same. So what would happen then if the price of one of those goods was to go up? What would happen to the demand for the other one? So think about the demand for Coca-Cola when the price of Pepsi Cola has risen. Well, presumably, if the price of Pepsi Cola has risen, people will demand less Pepsi Cola and more Coca-Cola. So if the price of a substitute rises, the demand for our goods should also rise. In other words, the demand curve should shift to the right. So one thing that shifts the demand curve to the right, let's do those, is an increase in the price of a substitute. Okay, because if we're talking about Coca-Cola, if Pepsi becomes more expensive, people switch away from Pepsi towards Coke. Okay, so that's what substitutes are. So you can think of other examples of substitute. No, let's say my examples are all to do with food. So potatoes and rice. Okay, if potatoes become incredibly expensive, if there's a shortage of potatoes and they've become incredibly expensive, I'd probably switch and eat a bit more rice. My demand for rice would go up, or other more exotic forms of carbohydrate. I don't know, whatever you like, pasta or something. Okay, so maybe think of some examples of goods that you know which are substitutes for one another. Right. The other category of goods which are related to each other are complements. And notice that they're spelt with an E, not an I. So not complement, not you're wearing a lovely hat or something, but complements are things that go together, like bread and butter, or cars and petrol, or fish and chips. So what happens if the price of a complement rises? Let's think about the thing that is going to cause the demand for our good to go up. Okay, let's try that. So if the price of bread falls, then the quantity of bread demanded is going to increase. So bread has become cheaper. Well, butter is a complement for bread. So we would expect that the demand for butter would also increase. So if the price of a complement falls, that will increase the demand for our good. Okay, in my example, the price of bread falls, the demand for butter increases because they're complementary. They go together. So that's explained substitutes and complements, and that's everything that there is to be said about the prices of related goods. There's only two kinds of relationships we need to worry about: substitutes and complements. Okay, let's miss two out. I mean, I wouldn't do 2 second. I think income is a better one to do. Usually, when income rises, the demand for whatever good it is, good or service, rises. That's the common case. That's the most common case, and that case is one described as where the good is normal. So a normal good is one whose demand increases when income increases. So most things, that applies to most goods, So if income in the UK rises, probably the demand for, I know not during a pandemic, the demand for meals out, for dining out, is going to go up. It's a normal good. Or the demand for cinema tickets will go up. Okay, they're almost certainly normal goods. So one thing that will cause the demand curve, another thing that will cause the demand curve to shift to the right, is an increase in income, assuming the good is normal. Okay, but there's an opposite case. Some goods are what's called inferior, and all that means is their demand goes down when income goes up. Okay, so if you think about essential items in the supermarket, or floury potatoes, so things which are kind of pretty cheap, pretty low quality, let's say, well, arguably, I don't mean they're inferior in terms of inferior quality, but they're inferior in the sense that their demand is likely to go down when income goes up, right? Take floury potatoes, right? So kind of old potatoes, not very nice looking. So when my income rises, I don't have to eat these rather unpleasant potatoes. I can go for more exotic forms of carbohydrate. See, I told you my examples are all to do with food. So I'm likely to demand less old potatoes as my income rises. So that just means that old potatoes in my example, according to me, are inferior goods. Okay, own brand supermarket items probably inferior. Maybe the kind of stuff that you get in these sort of £1 shops, 99p shops, that maybe they're inferior too. I don't know. I'm speculating. Okay, so I would say that prices of related goods, income, they're the first two I would look at, And I've kind of done 6, but I think 6 is the third most important, or the third best place to start anyway. Preferences or tastes. Okay, so clearly, if your preferences or your tastes towards something improve, you like that thing more, in other words, if your tastes change favorably towards something, then you're likely to demand more of it. So that would cause the demand curve to shift to the right. So if an advertising campaign makes people's preferences or tastes change favorably towards the item, that's going to increase the demand for the good. It's going to shift the demand curve to the right. Okay, equally, if you have an adverse change in taste, if there's a health scare or some other thing that causes people to look at something less favorably, then the demand curve would shift to the left. Okay, so I would say 1, 3, and 6 are the places to start. Let's go to number 5, the size and structure of the population. Well, if the population gets bigger, then probably the demand for whatever it is going to increase. The demand curve is going to shift to the right. If you go onto the structure of the population, then it gets a bit more complicated. I mean, if you're talking about a good that is largely bought by people who are aged between 20 and 40, and the population ages, then the demand curve is likely to shift to the left. You know, if suddenly most of the population is above the age of 50, or more of them above the age of 50, and this thing, whatever it is, appeals in particular to the 20 to 40 demographic, then that's a negative effect on demand. So you just have to tell the right story. Okay, so that's 5. Expected future prices. Okay, this is quite a good one to think about. Suppose that you think that the price of the item is going to go up tomorrow or in the future. So whatever it is going to become more expensive, right? Well, you want to get it now. You want to demand it now. So in terms of current demand, if we think that expected future prices are going to be higher, that has a positive effect on demand now, on current demand. So that would shift the demand curve to the right. If you thought the opposite, and this is new technological goods, new technology tends to suffer from this. If we think, oh well, if I just wait a year, the price of that computer is going to be lower, or if I'm thinking about investing in I don't know, photovoltaic panels for my roof, or an electric car or something like that, I think, well, if I just wait a year, the price will come down. Then that has a negative effect on current demand, doesn't it? You think, well, I'll wait till it's cheaper. So again, you just have to get the story straight. There's no reason why you should be any worse at thinking up a story than me. You're just as capable of thinking up a story. But just bear in mind that we're relating it to which way the demand curve shifts. Okay. I think I won't make up a story to do with number 4. I think that you could do that. It's not one that I would have on if I were designing the list. I wouldn't have put it on. It doesn't mean it's not. You can't make it work. You can, but you think up a story to do with number 4. Right. Now this slide. Let's make this kind of voluntary. If you like maths and algebra, fine. If you don't, then you can just let this go by. I don't think. I think maybe not in 1 or 2 seminar questions, but in terms of coursework, you don't have to do demand curves mathematically. Okay, but if you were doing them mathematically, you could assume that the demand curve was a straight line, which is what's assumed here. So the demand curve is drawn as a straight line. It doesn't have to be a straight line in general, but in this case it is. Then it has an equation, and the equation is, in general, it's P, price, is equal to some parameter A minus some parameter B times the quantity, in this case, the quantity demanded. So we can say it's always true that a straight line has that kind of equation. It's basically y is equal to mx plus c if you did it that way at school, or y is equal to a plus bx. So That's the equation of a straight line. You may know that, you may have known it once and have forgotten it. It doesn't matter hugely. If it really matters, I'll go over it with you in the seminar. We'll see how we go. I mean, it's useful. Math is useful, and I like it, but I'm aware that to some people it's like speaking a foreign language. So you can write the demand curve that way round, or if you're okay at algebraic manipulation, you can make QD, the quantity demanded, you can make it the subject of the equation, which means you can get it to the left-hand side. So I'll describe how you do that. And so if you start with P is equal to A minus B QD, imagine that you add B QD to both sides. So B QD appears as a plus on the left-hand side, and it cancels out with the minus B QD on the right-hand side. So what you would have, I haven't got this on the slide, is you'd have B QD plus P is equal to A. So you could write that down if you want to. B QD plus P is equal to A. Then take P away from both sides. So if you take P away from both sides, I have to remember what I've got. Taking the P away from the left-hand side makes it disappear. So on the left-hand side, you've only got B QD. On the right-hand side, you've now got A minus P. So I've got, if you want to write it down, B QD is equal to A minus P. Right, now divide both sides by B. If you divide both sides by B, the B disappears from the left-hand side, and the right-hand side becomes A over B minus P over B, which is written on the slide. So QD is equal to A over B minus P over B. Okay. I'm not requiring you, it doesn't matter if you don't want to do that. That's absolutely fine. But what that says is it gives you a relationship which explains how the quantity demanded depends on the price. And we could have numbers. So at some stage we might have numbers, but I don't mind about the algebraic manipulation and the A's and B's. That's not important for us.